A few days ago, I had the displeasure of watching what could possibly be one of the worst debates and worst performances in a debate that I've seen in a really long time. And it was this debate. It was the SERFS debate, Lawrence Southern on Canadian genocide. It was being hosted by Dylan Burns, and it was Lance and this guy. I think his name was Rabbits something, but he only spoke for 10 minutes, so who knows? Versus Lawrence Southern and Counterpoints. And who boy, this was probably one of the worst cases of platforming I have ever heard in my entire life. Basically, throughout the entire debate, Lance and the Rabbit guy got completely stomped on every point. When it came to optics, they looked terrible. Especially the Rabbits guy. The Rabbits guy, even though he only spoke for 10 minutes, it felt like 30 minutes because every time he spoke, I would cringe so hard that I was literally like rolling back the space-time continuum. Because somehow, no matter what it was, even if he was being called out for like not knowing the definition of mass grave and thinking mass grave is a place where there are lots of people that are buried, he somehow manages to be so condescending while being corrected that it's honestly astounding. Like a lot of people have said, props to the guy without the cam for having the most astounding smug to stupidity ratio I've ever seen. It was insane. And then from Lance, stuff wasn't really a lot better either. On top of further exacerbating the issues with his debate teammate by correcting counterpoints at one point towards the end of the debate for being condescending when speaking to the Rabbit guy. He also didn't really come prepared to the debate as a whole. His opening statement was decent, but from there, his understanding of number one, what needed to be done and what needed to be proven and what needed to be responded to during debate was garbage. His optics were really bad. His preparations were awful. And honestly, the core reason why this is so disappointing and why this is so bad is twofold. It's number one, Lawrence Southern was on this panel, and Lawrence Southern is not a great, political commentator. Kind of some iffy views here and there. Probably should do our best to ensure that if we are to have a debate, especially with this person, that we come well prepared and we're able to push back against the points. Point number two is that Lance has been preaching and talking about these issue of, Canadian genocide and the indigenous people there for months and months now. It's been his like driving thing. He's been, like selling his content and like his general persona and the stuff he talks about with a heavy connection to that specific topic. So you would expect, if this is something that, is as important to him as he makes it out to be through his tweets, through his content, through the way he speaks and the way he carries himself, you would expect for him to have done a lot of research on it. But he absolutely hasn't. The stuff he was saying in the debate was self-contradictory. He didn't have a proper understanding of the timelines of these specific events in regards to especially the claims he was making about the standards and the quality of the indigenous schools at the time. He said things like, putting like sort of like muddying the waters in a really negative way. So he focused a lot on, for instance, the fact that the residential schools, as they were called, were active until 1975 or something, I believe. And so, this isn't really that long ago. You have people whose parents, that are alive today went to these schools. So there's a negative effect from it. And then in the next breath, to prove his point that these schools were, of terrible quality, he talks about a study made in 1904, which misses a lot of decades in between them, which is the real thing he's trying to talk about because he's focusing more on the recent things. And then also the Rabbit guy who just so detached from reality that there was a denying about the links between the recent discourse on, the struggles that Indigenous people face in Canada and church burnings in Canada, just completely denying that link as a whole, and implying that the reason why there are more church burnings in Canada at the moment is because the priests aren't putting the incense, storing it correctly, and it's catching on fire now spontaneously, following the events that or what's being discussed right now in Canada. So the performance of this is just it was terrible. It was horrible. And I harped on Destiny a little bit a while back for playing video games with Lauren Southern, and having a bit of a political chat on the side or discussion on the side. And I said, that probably wasn't like a example of responsible platforming. That just pales in comparison by miles and miles and miles to the terrible platforming that occurred right now in this specific debate between Lance and Lawrence Southern and Counterpoints. I'm not even going to say the rabbit guy's name because he spoke for 10 minutes and was just consistently cringy throughout his entire short span of 10 minutes in which he spoke. But Lauren and Counterpoints came off looking phenomenal in this. And the issue with that, Counterpoints coming off looking phenomenal, props to him. Lauren coming off looking phenomenal and looking like the most reasonable or one of the most reasonable people on that panel is terrible. I don't even know how you can possibly even manage that, how you can mess up that badly for that to be the outcome of this. And then at the end, there is this really it's true, but it's very cringy segment at the end where in Lance's closing statements, he wants to rabble off all the terrible things that Lauren Sutton has done and that she believed or whatever at the very end of the closing statements, which makes it look even more bad and makes, a progressive movement or I suppose, a Lauren opposition movement or people that criticize Lauren to be, not very good, to be cowardly, just slipping that in at the very end. And especially when that's put at the tail end of such a terrible debate performance, as we saw, during this debate, it was embarrassing. It wasn't something that that should have occurred by any stretch of the imagination in any way. That was something that was excruciatingly negative, and we need to definitely call out stuff like this, and Lance and the SERFs and the rabbit guy, which I don't think we're ever gonna see them again, need to get dragged for this and understand that what happened there was terrible and it should never have happened again, because that was I can't tell if the reason why Lance performed so poorly is because he doesn't have the capacity to do so or because he wasn't prepared. I think it probably is a combination of the two. I don't think he prepared for this debate at all. Because if he had prepared for this, then you could give the vast majority of the people, if they had prepared somewhat for this given debate topic and not just collected a series of talking points without knowing enough information about them and trying to present them like that in a debate, would have done better than he did. So it's, number one, he's not a debate person. It doesn't seem like that. He's more of a React Andy type person. He doesn't fare well in debates. So he certainly shouldn't have agreed to do a debate with Lauren Southern, of all people. Number two, he didn't do enough prep work, which illustrates a general sense of nonchalance for the weight of, number one, the topic that is being discussed, which, keep in mind, he's been touting as the number one issue he's been standing for on his channel over the past few weeks, maybe month, I'm not sure. But number two, just a complete, once again, a nonchalance for the importance of ensuring that a platform debate against Lauren Southern, goes in a good way and you're able to effectively push back against the points of which you weren't able to do at all. Dylan Burns had to hop in multiple times and beg for Lance and the rabbit person to actually make arguments and actually speak, because they didn't have anything to say. They weren't prepared. They didn't have the counter arguments. They didn't have their own initial arguments, really. They just kept repeating and restating previous points over and over. And when those were attacked, they just pivoted to something else. It was really terrible. Some other notable terrible moments were, for instance, the fact that Lance at one point asked Lauren Southern to prove to her that there wasn't any forms of abuse taking place at these camps. That's not how debates work. That's not her job. That's your job. You're presenting a positive. Lauren Southern or your opposition in any instance can prove a negative. That's not how it works. That's not what you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to prove that something didn't happen. You're supposed to prove that it did happen. Unless there's a specific context in which it is possible for there to have been resources produced on whether or not something did or didn't happen, such as, for example, maybe a lawsuit or an independent investigation or for something of that nature. There's no way to be able to prove that something didn't happen. Can you prove to me right now that our entire weather cycle isn't just the job of an intergalactic turtle who actually, through their excretionary processes, bring about all of the sort of rainfall and other meteorological? what's the word for weather stuff, and all the other weather processes we see, and they've actually done it so well that that it looks like it's, you know, self-sustaining and that we can explain scientifically, but it's all actually that intergalactic turtle. Can you prove to me that that's not the case? Well, no, you can't like prove something that's like you have to prove the existence. It's the onus is on you to prove that something occurred or something exists in those situations. And your claim is invalidated by the fact that an opposition isn't able to disprove, you know, like the stuff that you're saying, especially if you're not providing any evidence for it. It's especially funny as well if you couple the fact that you know, the SERFS and Lance has been talking for so long about how other, like, you know, left-wingers who debate like right-wingers or reactionaries are engaging in irresponsible platforming, and how, oh, they're too friendly in their debates and they make the opposition look so good. When he comes on here and holds this type of debate, it's honestly, it's terrible. It's done harm for the movement that they're talking about, you know, discussions related to the, you know, Canadian indigenous struggle that they're having there. It's looked terrible for Lance and for the, you know, rabbit guy, which, yeah, it should, because that was terrible. And then it's also further validated and make Lauren Southern look incredible in this specific debate, just because of purely by virtue of how utterly incompetent and how terrible the argumentation was on the side of Lance and the rabbit person throughout this entire debate, on the optics, on the arguments, on the responses, on the time spent speaking, on the sources. Yeah, it was just, it was an utter disaster. And yeah, the words of advice for this point, I suppose, going forward, is that number one, Lance, either go into some like debate masterclass. You like go, you know, you leave streaming behind, you go into like the fucking mountains and reflect and meditate and acquire divine knowledge about how debate should be handled, and then come back a new debater, a new online political commentator, or don't do debates. That's point number one. Point number two, please, if you're having debates, just generally, also online, and especially against like individuals who are more like, you know, right-wing than they may appear, or who you genuinely regard as somebody that may be harmful to discourse, please take in and put in the effort to make preparations for the debate, to ensure that you have content ready to go, to ensure that you understand the prompts, to ensure that you're going to be able to like predict what the main counter arguments and arguments from their side is going to be, and so that you don't end up contradicting yourself and misunderstanding very, very basic things, such as in this debate, just the structure of debates in terms of proving negatives, the problems of, for example, the studies he was using in regards to the other facts he was like laying forth, understandings on the GDR scans, I believe they're called, or something like that, in regards to like what type of information that they can divulge and all of that, you know, from the sort. And yeah, just please do preparation. Don't get nonchalant. Preparation is important. Point number three, never let this rabbit person anywhere near online debate ever again, because holy shit, that was unbearable. They didn't speak, they didn't have arguments, but whenever they did speak, it just like hurt the case more and more and more. And my prediction is, or I suppose my theory is, that Lance was heavily relying on the rabbit person to come with the majority of the information on the topic. At least I hope so, because I really hope he wasn't going into that debate with his level of knowledge, with his level of skill, with his level of preparation, and expecting him to be able to hold his own in that debate. So I hope that he was heavily relying on the rabbit person, but then even then, you should have probably checked that beforehand. And yeah, as a result of this, Lauren Southern has ended up looking really, really good. The left side of this discussion has ended up looking absolutely terrible, and it was an absolute laughingstock, this debate. It was a debate that I had the displeasure of watching in its entirety. So yeah, fix your debate stuff, Lance. It's my piece of advice. And to the rabbit person, stop debating. These debates would like pales in comparison to even like the Xander Hall Lauren Southern debate, which we all regarded as was being pretty bad, and that Xander Hall didn't do a great job there pushing back against the points, and Lauren came up looking really good. That's nothing compared to the effects and what ended up occurring in this specific debate that happened here. So it's not good, folks. It's not good.